I never imagined that a single sealed envelope could destroy the last fragile thread holding my family together, but that was exactly what happened the night my brother slammed my head into the wall and left me to die on the hardwood floor of our grandmother's hallway. It began with nothing more than suspicion, a faint itch in the back of my mind telling me that something was wrong with the documents Michael claimed he had already given to the attorney. I had returned to my grandmother's house that evening, determined to find the truth, even if it meant searching through every drawer she had ever owned. I found the envelope almost by accident, hidden beneath a stack of unpaid utility bills Michael had shoved inside a kitchen cabinet, and my heart pounded when I recognized my grandmother's handwriting. The ink was faded, the edges slightly curled, but the moment my fingers brushed against it, I knew this was what Michael had been hiding. I turned toward the dining room where he stood gripping his phone like it was a lifeline, speaking in a hushed and desperate tone to someone he clearly did not want me to hear. When he saw the envelope in my hands, his entire face froze. For a few seconds, he did not move, did not blink, did not breathe. Then the mask snapped and his eyes filled with something wild and furious, something I had only glimpsed once in my childhood but never understood until now. He lunged forward so fast I barely had time to react. I backed away, clutching the envelope to my chest, but he grabbed my wrist with a force that made my bones scream. "Give me that!" he said through clenched teeth, his breath hot and sharp with fear that smelled almost metallic. I shook my head and tried to pull away. "This is Grandma's envelope. She meant for the lawyer to see it." "You lied, Michael. You hid this." Something in him snapped with a soundless crack, as if a wire inside his mind had stretched too tight too long and finally tore. "You do not deserve anything, Laura. You never did." His voice was low, steady, chilling in its certainty. Before I could scream, before I could even process what he was about to do, he tightened his grip in my hair and pulled me toward the hallway wall. My feet slid across the polished floor and I clawed at his wrist, but he was stronger, fueled by panic, and the sickening terror of someone who knows the truth is slipping out of his control. Then he slammed my head into the wall. The crack echoed through the narrow hallway, sharp and hollow like a gunshot trapped in a wooden box. White pain exploded behind my eyes, a blinding flash that seemed to split my skull open. I felt myself collapsing, my knees buckling my fingers, losing the envelope that fluttered to the ground beside me. I tasted metal. My vision pulsed in and out, shrinking at the edges as if someone were dimming the lights of the world. I tried to lift my hand, but my arm felt disconnected from my body. I heard my own breath, ragged and wet. Michael crouched beside me for a moment, his shadow bending over my face like a thundercloud. He picked up the envelope with a shaky hand, stuffed it into his jacket, then leaned close enough for me to smell the sharp scent of nicotine he always tried to hide. "You are nothing, Laura. Nothing. And after tonight, no one will ever believe a word you say." I wanted to respond. I wanted to scream. But the words pooled somewhere deep in my throat, heavy as lead. My fingers twitched helplessly against the floor. My heart thudded in slow, uneven beats as the world tilted sideways. When he stood and walked away, his footsteps were steady, almost casual, as if he had simply finished a chore he resented doing. I heard the front door creak open and then slam shut behind him. The house fell silent except for the faint ringing inside my ears. My vision wavered again, sharp, then blurry, then sharp again. I tried to focus on the ceiling, on the faint pattern in the wooden beams, on anything that might anchor me to consciousness. But the floor felt cold beneath my cheek, and the warmth spreading near my temple told me I was bleeding more than I wanted to admit. I was slipping, fading, sliding somewhere dark and heavy. Through the fog, I heard a voice outside. Distant at first, then sharper trembling with confusion and fear. It was Mrs. Doyle, my grandmother's next-door neighbor, the woman who watered her roses every morning and always brought us lemon cookies on Christmas Eve. I heard her call my name. Then I heard the panic rise in her voice as she shouted again. I could not answer. She must have heard the thud. She must have recognized Michael's voice. A moment later, her footsteps shuffled across the porch, and through the open window I heard her gasp. "Oh, dear Lord, Laura, I am calling for help. Hold on, sweetheart. Please, hold on." I wanted to tell her I was trying. I wanted to tell her not to leave. But my eyes closed on their own, heavy as stone, while her trembling voice faded in and out. The last thing I heard before everything went black was her voice cracking as she spoke into the phone, telling the dispatcher that a young woman was dying on her grandmother's floor and that the attacker had just run off into the dark. And then there was nothing. When I woke up in the hospital the morning after the attack, the world felt strangely muffled, like someone had wrapped the edges of my life in cotton and pushed me under water. The ceiling lights buzzed faintly above me, casting a pale glow across the room, and for a long moment I lay completely still, staring at the tiles while trying to piece together who I was and how I had ended up there. It is a strange thing how trauma rearranges your memories. Before the paramedics, before the pain, before Michael's voice echoing in my skull, there was another life I lived, one defined not by violence, but by quiet work, constant caretaking, and a childhood shaped by the knowledge that I was always the child who mattered less. My name is Laura Bennett, and for the last 12 years, I have worked as a full-time caregiver in a memory care facility on the outskirts of Portland. People often tell me it is a difficult job, maybe even a depressing one, but they do not understand that caring for others was never a burden to me. It was an instinct, a natural extension of the only relationship in my life that ever felt unconditional, the bond I had with my grandmother Evelyn. She was the one who taught me how to braid my hair, how to make cornbread from scratch, how to sit quietly beside someone who was hurting without needing to fix anything. When she began to lose her memory, I was the one who stayed. I learned how to calm her during her episodes, how to help her dress, how to soothe her fear when she forgot where she was. Caring for her made me realize that love does not always come from parents. Sometimes it comes from the person who sees you when everyone else looks through you. Growing up, my parents never said they loved Michael more than me, but love is not measured in words. It is measured in the 1,000 small ways a family reacts to you over time. I learned young that Michael could do no wrong. He was the golden child, the star quarterback in high school, the kid teachers whispered about with pride, the boy neighbors adored, the son my mother insisted was destined for greatness. And then there was me, the quiet one, the girl who got straight A's but never heard a single congratulations, the daughter who stayed home sick because mom forgot to pick up her prescription, the child who stood alone on the front porch during Michael's birthday parties because no one remembered to tell her she could invite friends too. My mother always said I was too sensitive. My father said I was too emotional. Michael said nothing at all except when he needed a ride or money or someone to blame. None of it changed as we grew older. When Michael failed out of his first year of college, my parents said he was under too much pressure. When he dropped out of the electrician program, he promised to finish. They said he just needed time. When he racked up debt from poker games and online betting, they paid the bills and called it a temporary setback. When I earned my nursing certification while working 2 jobs, they did not attend the ceremony. They said something came up, and I believed them because I had grown used to believing excuses. Even now, lying in a hospital bed with a bandage wrapped around my head, I felt the same familiar ache settle into my chest. The ache of being the child who had to survive quietly while the other was allowed to fall apart loudly. I often told myself that my life was enough, that my work mattered, that the residents at the care facility depended on me in ways that felt meaningful, even sacred. Some days that felt true. Other days it felt like a consolation prize for never being chosen by the people who were supposed to love me first. Grandma Evelyn was the exception. She chose me, every time. When I visited her on weekends during college, she always asked about my dreams before asking about my grades. When my mother forgot my 23rd birthday, Grandma arrived with a homemade lemon cake and a small, handwritten card that said, "I am proud of you, sweetheart." When Michael blocked my number during one of his gambling episodes, she told me she wished she could give me the kind of brother I deserved. She saw me. She loved me. And even after her memory began slipping, even after she struggled to remember where she kept her favorite mug or which day of the week it was, she never forgot my name. Sometimes she forgot that Michael existed at all, and I used to think that was the universe's quiet way of telling the truth. Her decline was slow at first, then sudden, the way it often is. One winter morning, she woke up convinced she was 10 years old again. Another day, she asked where her husband was, though he had been gone 20 years. And then, one afternoon, she called me Laura dear with the same gentle voice she used when I was small, and for a moment, she was herself again. It was the last lucid moment I ever had with her. When she died 8 months later, I felt my world shrink. And yet somewhere inside me, I believed that she had left something for me. Not money, not property, but meaning, a thread tying me to the only part of my family history that did not feel poisoned. This belief was the quiet pulse beneath everything that came after, including the night Michael attacked me. I always sensed that my grandmother trusted me with something important, something she did not trust Michael with, and deep down I understood why. She knew him. She saw through him long before the rest of us did. I just never expected the truth she left behind to be powerful enough to shatter the lie our family had lived under for years, or that uncovering it would nearly cost me my life. That was before I knew how far Michael had already fallen and how far he was willing to go to drag me down with him. If there is one thing I have learned about families, it is that favoritism is not always loud. Sometimes it moves quietly, shaping the air around a household until it becomes the oxygen everyone breathes without realizing it. That was the way it worked in my family. Michael was not just the oldest child. He was the promise my parents invested in, the dream they carried, the walking embodiment of every expectation they ever had for themselves. I was the second child, useful when needed, overlooked when convenient, forgotten when embarrassing. The imbalance began early, long before Michael's life slipped into the spiral of debt and excuses that would eventually pull us all under. It appeared in small things, like the way my mother praised every average drawing Michael made in elementary school, while barely glancing at the certificates I brought home. It appeared in the way my father spoke to him with a prideful softness he never volunteered for me, even when I achieved something he would have celebrated in a stranger's child. Most days I told myself it was harmless. Parents are human. They have favorites. But favoritism becomes something far more dangerous when the golden child is deeply flawed. The trouble with Michael was not that he made mistakes. It was that he made them constantly and never took responsibility. He gambled away his paychecks during his 20s and convinced our parents it was stress. He borrowed money from family friends, promising to pay it back, and then avoided them until they forgave him. He quit job after job, always with a story about an unfair supervisor or a toxic workplace or a coworker who sabotaged him. My parents absorbed each excuse the way a sponge absorbs water, expanding with each lie, but never squeezing back. They never asked questions. They never demanded accountability. They never imagined he might be the architect of his own downfall. Instead, they protected him from consequences, and the more they shielded him, the bolder he became. After Grandma Evelyn died, the favoritism that used to simmer quietly in our household turned into something sharper and more suffocating. Michael sensed new power the moment she passed, as if her absence freed him from the last person who saw through him. He positioned himself as the caretaker of the estate, even though he had never cared for her. He told neighbors he was handling all the legal work. He told my parents he was taking charge to honor her memory. In reality, he was circling the house like a starving wolf, desperate for a way to claim it. I suspected this the afternoon my mother told me she and Michael were meeting with a realtor to discuss listing the house. I remember the smell of dish soap lingering in the kitchen, the fading sunlight reflecting off the old tile floor, the way she spoke casually, as if she were announcing a garage sale and not the erasure of the one sanctuary I had left. "We think it is for the best," she said, brushing crumbs off the counter. "Michael needs the money. He has been under a lot of pressure." Pressure! That was her word for his gambling addiction, his unpaid debts, his looming foreclosure. She wrapped it in gentleness, softened it with sympathy, and in doing so, tied a ribbon around the very thing that was destroying him. I asked her why she was letting him lead. She snapped, "Laura, stop making this difficult. Your brother is trying. He is the one who has been handling everything. You have no idea how much stress he is under." Her voice broke when she mentioned him, but never for me. It was the same old pattern, the one I had lived under for 30 years. Michael made a mess, and I was expected to be understanding. Michael created a crisis, and I was expected to stay quiet. If I questioned anything, I became the problem. Still, something in me resisted. I told her we needed to wait for the will to be read, that Grandma would never want quick decisions made in haste. She accused me of being dramatic. When I said I had concerns about the documents Michael was handling, she accused me of jealousy. That word struck deeper than she knew. I had never been jealous of Michael. I had been invisible beside him, but invisibility does not breed envy. It breeds resignation. What I felt that day was not jealousy. It was fear. Fear that the truth my grandmother entrusted me to protect would be buried under Michael's recklessness. Fear that my parents would believe anything he said, just as they always had. Fear that no one would listen. That fear sharpened into certainty a week later when I overheard Michael in the backyard speaking in a harsh whisper to someone on the phone. "I need the house. I will get it. Just give me a few more days." The backyard was quiet except for the rattling of the broken wind chime Grandma never replaced. His words hit me like cold water. He was not grieving. He was calculating. The house was not family property to him. It was collateral. He ended the call abruptly when he noticed me. His smile stretched across his face as if it were painted on. "You scared me for a second," he said. I did not respond. I knew what desperation sounded like. I heard it in patients who forgot their own names. I heard it in families terrified of losing their parents. I heard it in voices of caretakers who spent their lives trying to save someone they loved. But this was something different. This was hunger. This was greed hiding behind charm. This was a man who saw an opportunity and believed no one could stop him. As he walked past me into the house, I caught a faint tremor in his hand. That tremor told me more than any words could. Michael was drowning. And drowning people I knew too well can become dangerous when they see someone else holding a lifeboat. That was the moment I understood the conflict was no longer simmering beneath the surface. It was rising, it had teeth, and it was coming for me. The first real sign that something was wrong appeared on a quiet Thursday afternoon, 3 days after I overheard Michael's phone call in the backyard. I had gone to Grandma's house to sort through some of her belongings, hoping the familiar smell of lavender candles and old paperbacks might calm the uneasy feeling that had been sitting in my stomach like a stone. The house was unusually silent, even for a home that no longer held the person who filled it with warmth. When I stepped into her bedroom, I stopped cold. The drawer of her writing desk was pulled out farther than I had ever seen its contents, scattered across the floor like a storm had torn through. Papers, envelopes, old receipts, even her address book lay in disarray. My grandmother was meticulous. She labeled everything folded, everything stored, everything exactly where it belonged. She never left drawers open. She never left messes behind. My pulse quickened as I crouched down and scanned the pile. Something was missing. I could not explain how I knew, but I felt the absence like a space carved out of the air. The brown envelope she kept her legal documents in, the one she never let out of her sight, was gone. I checked the desk twice. Then the dresser. Then the safe box where she kept her old jewelry. Nothing. When my mother arrived 20 minutes later with a plastic bag of cleaning supplies, she barely glanced at the chaos. "Michael has been handling things," she said, shrugging as if a ransacked drawer were normal. "He probably needed something and forgot to put everything back. This is why I do not want you digging around. You always make a fuss." A fuss. That was the word she used to describe the gut-deep fear rising through my chest. I asked her what papers Michael had taken. She frowned, annoyed at the question. "I do not know, Laura. Stop assuming the worst of your brother. He is doing his best." I almost laughed. His best. His best had left our grandmother's desk looking like a crime scene. His best had turned our family into a war zone. His best had just disappeared, an envelope no one else knew existed. I wanted to push, but my mother's face shut tight like a door being locked from the inside. There was no reaching her when it came to Michael. There never had been. Later that day, as I was leaving the house, I heard voices drifting from the garage. Michael's voice was sharp and strained the way a man sounds when his entire world is collapsing in slow motion. I paused beside the door, heart thudding. "I said I will get you the money. The house is worth more than enough. Just give me until next week." Silence followed, then the unmistakable tone of a man being threatened. "If you show up here again, I swear to God I will call the police." I could hear the tremble in his voice now, not anger, but fear mixed with desperation. His words slipped out like he was bargaining for oxygen. "Yes, I understand. Please, just one more week." When the call ended, I backed away before he stepped out and saw me. That was when the pieces began falling into place. The pressure, the sudden rush to sell the house, the insistence that he handle all the paperwork, the trembling hands. Michael was not just struggling with debt, he was drowning in it. And this house, the home my grandmother cherished, was the last rope he could cling to. But the financial disaster alone could not explain the disappearing envelope or the ransacked drawer. Desperation is not a motive by itself. It is a spark. Something else had ignited the fire. That night, unable to shake the anxiety buzzing beneath my skin, I returned to the house. I told myself it was for closure, but the truth was simpler. I needed answers. As I stepped through the front door, something caught my eye. A faint light flickered near the front window. Mrs. Doyle stood outside, arms folded, watching the house with an expression that carried both worry and suspicion. When she saw me, she hurried toward the porch. "I wanted to wait for you," she said breathlessly. "I saw your brother leaving earlier, and something in the way he was acting did not sit right with me." I told her about the missing papers, the phone call, the desk drawer. She sighed heavily. "Your grandmother was a smart woman, Laura. She knew your brother better than anyone. She told me once that trust should never be given freely. It should be earned. And she said your brother had been spending years proving he did not deserve it." I swallowed hard. Did she ever say why Mrs. Doyle hesitated for a long moment, then leaned closer? Because she feared his temper, and she feared what he might do if he ever felt his back against a wall. Her voice cracked slightly. "And right now, Laura, I think his back is against a very dangerous wall." Her words wrapped themselves around my spine like cold fingers. I did not want to believe it, but the signs were no longer subtle. Something was unraveling, something deeper than debt and family tension, something that made the air around that house feel heavier each day. Before leaving, Mrs. Doyle placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your grandmother did not trust your brother with her most important decisions. You should not either," she said. Then she gave me a look filled with an unspoken warning. "Be careful, dear. Some people get dangerous when they realize they are about to lose everything." When I walked back inside, the silence hit me like a wall. A house full of memories should feel familiar. But that night, my grandmother's home felt like a place waiting for a storm. I returned to my grandmother's house early the next morning, long before the sun had fully risen, driven by a mix of dread and determination that made my hands shake as I unlocked the front door. The air inside felt cooler than usual, carrying the faint scent of her lavender hand cream, a scent that always lingered in the rooms long after she passed. I stood in the hallway for a few seconds, listening to the quiet, as if the walls themselves might whisper what had happened to the missing papers. Something inside me knew that answers were here somewhere hidden in the careful routines my grandmother followed with almost religious precision. She was not careless. She was not forgetful before her illness. If something important was missing, it was because someone had taken it, or because she had hidden it intentionally. I started in the living room, sorting through every drawer of the old oak cabinet she used as a filing system. Nothing unusual. Nothing missing, but nothing revealing either. I moved to her bedroom and checked the nightstand, the dresser, the small sewing basket she kept by the window. Still nothing. My frustration grew as the morning stretched on, frustration tinged with guilt because I felt like I was rummaging through her life rather than protecting it. When I stepped into her study, the one room she guarded fiercely while she was alive, I paused. The desk was still a mess from Michael's earlier intrusion papers scattered across the floor. I knelt and began organizing them back into neat stacks, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume that clung to the wooden drawers. That was when I saw something I had not noticed before. The old leather Bible she kept on the bookshelf was not sitting properly. It leaned slightly to one side, as if someone had shoved it back in a hurry. My grandmother never shoved anything. I pulled the Bible down, feeling its weight and the soft edge of its cover. When I opened it, the spine cracked faintly, and I expected to find the handwritten notes she liked to make during church sermons. Instead, what I found made my breath stop. The center of the Bible had been carved out, a rectangular hollow cut cleanly through the pages, forming a hidden compartment. Inside lay a folded sheet of paper yellowed at the edges and worn from being handled over time. My hands shook as I lifted it out. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls leaned in to witness what I was about to uncover. I unfolded the paper, slowly, terrified and hopeful at the same time. It was a photocopy of a will, not the revised one Michael had shown my mother, not the half-explained version he had claimed was updated. This was something different, something older, something real. My grandmother's original signature sat at the bottom steady and unmistakable. My vision blurred for a second as the weight of the discovery sank in. The document was clear. My grandmother had left the house to me. Not to Michael, not to both of us, to me alone. The reason pressed on my heart like a truth I had always felt but never dared to name. She did not trust him. She trusted me. I read every line, absorbing each word as if they were pieces of her voice returning from silence. But then my stomach dropped. A portion of the page was torn. A jagged rip sliced through one of the clauses that would have made the photocopy legally significant. The most important section was damaged beyond readability. My hope flickered dimming. This photocopy alone could not win in probate court. It was evidence but incomplete. It was truth but not protection. I sat on the floor, the torn paper resting in my lap, and felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. My grandmother had hidden this for a reason. She knew someone might try to take the house from me. She anticipated deceit. She anticipated Michael. The realization hit me hard. She must have felt fear in her final months, fear that her wishes would not be honored, fear that the family would fracture under pressure and greed. And she had tried to shield me, even after her memory failed her. I closed my eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply to steady myself. The photocopy was important, but it was not enough. I needed the original document, the one Michael had hidden, the one he had claimed never existed, the one he had stolen from the drawer he ransacked. A surge of determination rose through me. I could no longer pretend this was speculation or paranoia. Michael was actively trying to erase me from our grandmother's final wishes. He was not just hiding documents. He was rewriting the truth. I folded the photocopy carefully and placed it back inside the hollowed Bible, not because I wanted to hide it again, but because it felt like the safest place until I could confront him. As I slid the Bible onto the shelf, I felt the familiar weight of inevitability settle over me. I would have to face him, not with anger, not with pleading, but with clarity. I stepped out of the study and made my way toward the kitchen, where the morning light filtered through the lace curtains Grandma hung herself. I took one last look at the house, at the furniture she polished every week, at the photographs she arranged with love, and I understood something with a heaviness that made my chest ache. This house was more than property. It was her legacy, her memory, and her final gift to me. Michael wanted to take it not because he valued it, but because he needed something to save himself. And I knew then that saving myself would mean stopping him, even if he hated me for it, even if my parents refused to believe me, even if confronting him meant risking everything. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers and took a photo of the torn document. Then I placed the original photocopy in my bag. I stood in the doorway, breathing in the quiet for a moment, before turning toward the storm I sensed was coming. I knew confronting Michael might provoke him, but I did not understand then just how far he was willing to go to protect the lie he built, or how violently he would react when he realized I could expose it. I drove to Michael's house with the photocopy in my bag and a knot tightening in my throat, the kind that forms when you know a confrontation is inevitable, and that the moment you step into it, something in your life will split permanently. His truck was parked crookedly in the driveway, one tire almost on the lawn, a detail that would have seemed insignificant on any other day, but now felt like a sign of the chaos swirling inside him. When I knocked on the door, he answered almost immediately, as if he had been pacing behind it. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair uncombed, and the smell of stale coffee clung to him. For a moment, we just stared at each other, absorbing whatever tension hovered between us like a thick, invisible film. "What do you want, Laura?" He finally snapped his voice too sharp, too impatient, too afraid. I stepped inside before he could block me, and he let me in only because he thought he still had control. The living room was cluttered with unopened bills, empty takeout containers, and a stack of folders spilling across the coffee table. He tried to slide one of them underneath a newspaper when he noticed me looking, but his movements were too rushed. Something in that folder mattered, something he did not want me to see. I did not sit down. I stood near the fireplace and pulled the photo of the torn will from my bag. "Michael," I said quietly, "why did this disappear from Grandma's desk?" He froze, not blinked, not shifted, just froze. Then his jaw tightened the way it always did when he was cornered. "You should not be digging around," he said. "You do not know what you are talking about." I held the photo out toward him. This was in her Bible. Hidden. She wanted me to have the house, Michael. "Why did you hide this from Mom and the lawyer?" His laugh was sharp and ugly. "Because it does not matter. A photocopy is worthless." She changed her mind. She wanted things divided. He spoke too quickly, too defensively, as if the lie had been waiting on his tongue. "You forged something, did you not?" I asked, and he flinched so fast I almost stepped back. "You changed something. You tampered with the documents." That was when something raw flickered in his expression, something between fear and rage. He ran a hand through his hair and turned his back on me, pacing once across the room before slamming his palm against the wall. "I need that house, Laura." "You do not." His voice cracked a fault line opening. "You have a job, you have a place to live, you are fine. You have always been fine." I stared at him stunned. Fine. That was how he saw me. Stable. Safe. Not because my life was easier, but because no one ever rushed to protect me the way they protected him. "You are drowning Michael," I said. "You are in debt. You are hiding things. You stole Grandma's will because it was the only thing left that could save you." He turned to me slowly, and for a moment I saw the exact thing my grandmother must have feared. Not just desperation, not just greed, loss of control. "You think you know everything," he whispered. "You think she loved you more." "She did not trust you," I said. "She trusted me. That did it." His face twisted, and I instantly regretted saying the truth out loud. That truth was gasoline on dry wood. He stepped toward me, his shoulders tense, his breath coming faster. "Who told you that? Who put that idea in your head?" "You," I said softly. "You did every time you hid something, every time you lied, every time you used her." He let out a strangled sound, something like a growl of frustration. "You cannot go to the lawyer with this," he said. "Do you understand? It will ruin everything." I felt myself stepping backward instinctively, my spine brushing the cold edge of the fireplace mantel. "I can, and I will. She trusted me with her home. I am not letting you sell it to pay off your gambling debts." The moment the word gambling left my mouth, he snapped. His arm shot out, grabbing my wrist, twisting hard enough to make my breath hitch in pain. "You do not talk about my finances," he hissed. "You do not get to judge me. You have no idea what I am dealing with." "Let go, Michael." I tried to pull free, but his grip only tightened. His eyes darted wildly around the room as if searching for something that would make this moment easier to control. "You always ruin things, Laura. You always show up at the worst time. You think you are better than me." I swallowed hard. "I am not better. I am not worse. I just want the truth honored." His grip trembled. A dangerous sign. I felt the shift before it happened. The shift from fear to fury, the shift from argument to something far more violent and irreversible. "I told you not to go near her papers," he growled. "And now look what you have done." I yanked my wrist free, finally gasping. "If you destroy that will, I will go straight to the attorney." That was the sentence that broke him. He lunged. His hands closed around my arm, shoving me back toward the hallway. He was not thinking. He was reacting. A man cornered by consequences he no longer had the skill to dodge. I stumbled, clutching my bag, my heartbeat wild and erratic. "Michael, stop." "You are scaring me." "Good," he said, voice trembling. "Maybe fear will finally shut you up." I made one final step backward, intending to put distance between us, but my heel caught the edge of the rug and I lost balance for a split second. In his panic, he grabbed me again, fingers digging into my shoulder. Pain shot down my side. "You will not ruin this for me, Laura. You will not!" His voice cracked on the last word. For a moment, the room blurred. His face contorted in anger, the photocopy in my bag crinkling beneath my grip, the smell of dust and stale air filling my lungs. This confrontation was not the storm. It was only the whisper before it, the moment before the wall, before the crack, before the blackout that would follow hours later in the hallway of our grandmother's house. If I had walked away, then maybe everything would have ended differently, but I did not. I stood my ground. And that is what pushed us both toward the breaking point. When consciousness finally returned, it came in fragments like pieces of a dream I could not hold on to long enough to understand. A sharp light pressed through my eyelids, and the steady beep of a monitor echoed somewhere behind me. My head throbbed with a pressure that made it difficult to breathe, and when I tried to lift my hand, a wave of dizziness rolled through me so violently that I had to squeeze my eyes shut again. Voices floated around me, muffled and distant, as if they were underwater. Someone said, "She is waking up." Someone else said, "Mild concussion, possibly moderate, keep monitoring." Slowly, the fog lifted, and I realized I was lying in a hospital bed, an IV dripping into my arm, the faint antiseptic smell clinging to the room like a second layer of air. Panic surged into my chest as memory rushed back in disjointed flashes. The confrontation, Michael's grip on my shoulder, the fear in his eyes, the house, the wall, the moment everything went dark. I tried to sit up, but a nurse gently pressed my shoulder. "Easy, you hit your head hard. Just breathe." Her voice was soft and steady and somehow maternal. I blinked at her, trying to find the words to ask how I got here, but my throat felt raw. She explained slowly that an ambulance had brought me in early that morning. A neighbor had called after hearing something and seeing me collapsed in the hallway. I swallowed hard, tasting metal. "Did someone bring me here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The nurse hesitated. "No one came with you. Just the paramedics." A hollow ache opened in my chest. Of course no one came with me. Of course I arrived alone. Before I could ask anything more, a police officer stepped into the room, tapping gently on the doorframe as if afraid to startle me. "Ms. Bennett, I am Officer Ramirez. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened." His tone was respectful but cautious, the way someone speaks to a person who might either fall apart or lash out. I nodded, though even the small movement made my head pulse painfully. He opened a small notebook. "The EMTs said there were signs of a struggle. Do you remember how you sustained the injury?" I closed my eyes, trying to piece together the fractured images. Michael yelling, Michael grabbing me, the hallway, the wall rushing toward my face. I do remember I whispered, "My brother." He pushed me. The officer's expression tightened with concern, but his voice remained steady. "Did he strike you intentionally?" "Yes." The word came out small but certain. He shoved me into the wall. He was angry. I was trying to protect something of my grandmother's, something he was trying to hide. Officer Ramirez asked for clarification, but the pain behind my eyes was blurring everything. I told him I had evidence, that Michael was hiding documents related to my grandmother's will, that he threatened me, that he grabbed me, that I blacked out. He listened carefully without interrupting. When I finished, he closed his notebook slowly. "We will file an incident report. For now, I recommend you stay somewhere safe. Do you have a family member you can stay with?" My laugh was weak and bitter. "No, I do not." He seemed to understand more from my tone than from my words. "I will be in touch when we have updates." He gave me a card and left. The room felt bigger after he walked out, emptier somehow. I lay there trying not to cry, trying not to think about Michael walking away from me while I lay unconscious, trying not to imagine how easily he had stepped over me in the dark hallway. And then the door opened again. My mother stepped inside. For a moment, she looked almost concerned, but the moment her eyes landed on the bandage near my temple, her expression hardened into something colder. "Laura, what did you do?" She said it the same way someone scolds a child for knocking over a vase. What did I do? I repeated, stunned. Mom. He pushed me. He hurt me. She let out a sigh, full of irritation, not worry. If you did not provoke him, he would not lose his temper. He has been under a lot of stress. You need to stop pushing him. I felt my breath catch in disbelief, like the room had suddenly lost all its oxygen. So it was my fault that he attacked me. My mother folded her arms. You make everything complicated. Michael is trying to handle the estate. You always show up and make trouble. I do not know what lies you told that officer, but you had better fix this. Her voice broke something deep inside me. All those years of never being believed, never being defended, never being seen stood between us like a wall I could not climb. She stayed only a few minutes before walking out as if my injuries were an inconvenience to her errands. I stared at the doorway long after she left, feeling hollow, like someone had scooped the air out of my body. I did not want to cry, but my vision blurred anyway. Maybe from the concussion, maybe from heartbreak. Hours passed quietly. Nurses checked my vitals. The beeping monitor kept time with my thoughts. The bright hospital lights softened into late afternoon. And just when I thought no one else would come, the door slid open and a familiar figure stepped inside. Mrs. Doyle. Her eyes filled with worry the moment she saw me. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, hurrying to my bedside. "I was so afraid this would happen." I reached for her hand as if it were the only solid thing in the room. "How did you know I was here?" She squeezed my fingers gently. "The police asked if I had seen anything the other night. I told them yes. And then I came straight here." I swallowed back tears. Mrs. Doyle leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Your grandmother trusted me with something. She wanted me to give it to you only when you needed it." She opened her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope, aged and creased at the edges. "And honey, I think you need it now." My breath caught. "What is it?" She pressed it into my hand. "The truth your brother tried to bury. You are not alone in this. Not anymore." The envelope in my hands felt heavier than paper should, almost as if it carried the weight of everything my grandmother had been trying to protect long before she died. I stared at it for several seconds, uncertain whether opening it would bring relief or detonate my life even further. Mrs. Doyle moved closer, her warm palm covering the back of my hand. "Go on, sweetheart. She wanted you to have this for a reason." My fingers trembled as I slid them beneath the flap and opened the seal that had yellowed with time. Inside were 2 items. The first was a neatly folded document. The second was a small USB drive, the kind my grandmother would never use herself, which meant someone must have helped her save something on it. I unfolded the document first, and my breath caught. It was a scanned copy of the original will, not a photocopy. A high-resolution digital scan printed clearly, the signature sharp, the date intact, the wording unmistakable. This was the real version, unmarred by rips or missing pieces. My grandmother had left the house entirely to me. There was no ambiguity, no clause benefiting Michael, no shared responsibilities, no secondary conditions. She had written explicitly that her home was to pass only to me upon her death. I felt tears sting at my eyes, not just because of the clarity of her intention, but because she had anticipated exactly what was unfolding now. She must have known someone would try to interfere. She must have known the original document could disappear. She must have known Michael. Beneath the scan was a brief handwritten note in her familiar looping script. "If they try to take this from you, Laura, trust your heart and the people who love you. I believe in your strength." I reread the words until they blurred. My grandmother had always spoken gently, but with a conviction that made you feel like you mattered in ways no one else ever made you feel. Even after she was gone, she somehow still found a way to put her hand on my shoulder. I wiped my eyes and looked at the USB drive. "What is on this?" I asked quietly. Mrs. Doyle's expression darkened with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Your grandmother asked me to record something for her. She knew her memory was slipping. She wanted to make sure her voice could still speak for her when the time came." My hands tightened around the drive. "A recording from her, yes, but there is more." Mrs. Doyle hesitated before pulling out a small notebook from her purse. The cover was worn, the edges curling, as if it had been read many times in private moments. Before I give this to you, I need to tell you something difficult. I braced myself. Your brother did not just take the envelope, she said softly. He tried to scare me into staying quiet. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He came to my house one evening knocking so loudly I thought the door would crack. He said not to interfere. He told me I did not understand what was at stake and that people could get hurt if I made things complicated. I felt cold, the kind of cold that goes straight to the bone. Did he threaten you? Not outright, she said, but the message was clear, and I knew then that your grandmother had been right to mistrust him. Anger and guilt twisted inside me. I had always known Michael's temper. I had always known his impulsiveness. But I had not known he would go after an elderly woman who had done nothing but care for our family for decades. He crossed a line so deep and so dark that part of me wondered if I had ever truly known him. Mrs. Doyle squeezed my hand. That is why I went to the police when they asked questions at the hospital. I could not pretend anymore. I nodded slowly, grateful in a way words could not express. Thank you, I whispered. She gave a small smile. Your grandmother loved you more than anything. She wanted you to have a future where you did not have to keep surviving your family. I opened the notebook she had given me. Inside were pages of my grandmother's writing from her last year. Some entries were fragmented, her mind slipping, but others were sharp and coherent. One page stood out. It detailed a morning where she overheard Michael yelling at my mother. The handwriting trembled, but the message was clear. He scares me. His anger has grown worse. I fear he will hurt someone someday. Beneath it, she had written my name, followed by a shaky heart. I pressed my fingers to the page as if I could touch her hand through time. The reality of everything she had feared now sat in my lap, and what happened to me in the hallway of her house proved she had not been imagining anything. I looked up at Mrs. Doyle, who watched me with eyes full of empathy and steel. There is something else, she said. Something you need to know. I waited, heart pounding. The camera on my porch caught your brother leaving your grandmother's house the night you were hurt. It shows him holding a brown envelope. It shows him running. And it shows that he did not even look back. I felt my chest tighten with a mixture of vindication and devastation. Can I have a copy, I asked. Already done. She pulled out her phone and tapped the screen, showing me a still frame of the footage. Michael silhouetted by the porch light, clutching the envelope like a thief fleeing a crime scene. The timestamp matched the night he had denied returning to the house. My hands shook as I stared at the image. This was proof. Proof that he stole the will. Proof that he lied. Proof that he left me unconscious. Everything inside me hardened into resolve. This would go to the attorney. This would go to the probate court. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like solid ground beneath my feet. Mrs. Doyle gently touched my shoulder. You are stronger than you think, and you are not alone anymore. For a long time, I had believed that being quiet kept peace, and that keeping peace was the only way to keep a family. But now, I understood something deeply and painfully. Peace without truth is not peace at all. It is captivity. And my grandmother had given me everything I needed to finally step free. The day after I was discharged from the hospital, still dizzy from the concussion, and still tender along the right side of my head, I sat in the quiet lobby of Harper Wells's law office, with the envelope, the scanned will, the USB drive, and the porch camera footage clutched in my hands like a lifeline. The office smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and fresh paper, and the soft instrumental music drifting through the room felt almost out of place considering the storm gathering in my chest. When Harper finally appeared in the doorway and called my name, her presence radiated a calm, grounded confidence that made my shoulders loosen for the first time in days. She was in her early 40s with sharp, observant eyes and a voice that carried the weight of someone who had spent years untangling family disputes far uglier than mine. Come in, she said, gesturing me toward a small conference room with a polished wooden table. As soon as the door closed behind us, she studied my bandaged forehead. I read your hospital report. I am sorry this happened to you. Her tone was sincere, not pitying, and something about it made my throat tighten. I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. There is something I need to show you. Actually, more than one something. I slid the scanned will across the table first. It is the original, I said. She left the house to me. Not shared, not divided, just me. Harper read through the document carefully, her eyes narrowing with interest. This is clear. The signatures match her legal record. The date is valid, and more importantly, it predates the version your brother submitted. She tapped the page. This is strong evidence, but not enough by itself if your brother argues she made a later revision. I nodded and pushed the USB drive toward her. There is also this. My grandmother recorded a statement. I have not listened to it yet. I was afraid. Harper connected the drive to her laptop, and after a moment her brows lifted. It is her voice. This is a protected asset in probate. This could be very powerful. When she pressed play, my grandmother's shaky but familiar voice filled the room. She spoke about loving me, about not trusting Michael's anger, about fearing he would manipulate my mother, and she stated clearly and calmly that her wish was for the house to go to me because she believed I would preserve it. By the time the recording ended, Harper leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. This is significant. It may not be a formal amendment, but it establishes intent. Intent is crucial in will disputes. I felt my eyes sting again. There is more, I whispered, pulling out my phone to show her the porch camera frame. This is Michael leaving my grandmother's house the night I was injured. He took the envelope. He has been hiding it. Harper's expression hardened. And this, she said slowly, is evidence of misconduct. If a beneficiary intentionally conceals a will or destroys one that is criminal, she wrote a few quick notes, her pen moving rapidly. But before we can use any of this effectively, we need to see what he filed. He may have submitted a forged document. I swallowed because hearing her say it aloud made everything suddenly sharper, heavier, more real. Can he get away with that? He can try, Harper replied, but forged wills rarely survive scrutiny. We will request a copy immediately and a handwriting analysis. If the signature is fraudulent, the court will reject it. And if he filed it knowingly, he could face charges. For the first time in days, hope flickered inside me like a match struck in darkness. Harper met my eyes. The probate hearing is scheduled for Friday. That gives us time, but not much. We need to be prepared for him to fight. He is desperate. Desperate enough to hurt me, I whispered, touching the tender spot on my head. Harper's gaze softened, but her voice was firm. Then we make sure he cannot hurt you again, and we make sure the court knows exactly what he has done. She asked me to recount everything from the confrontation to the hospital stay, and she took detailed notes, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions. When I described him grabbing me, twisting my arm, shouting at me, her jaw tightened. "And your mother blamed you?" she asked. I nodded, feeling shame flicker through me, even though none of this was my fault. Harper leaned forward. "Laura, listen to me. None of this is on you. None of it. She has protected him for so long that she cannot see the truth. But the court is not your mother. The court does not care about family favoritism. It cares about evidence. And right now you have quite a lot." When she said it, the weight in my chest loosened a fraction. Harper handed me a packet of information. "This outlines what will happen at the hearing. Your brother will present his will. We will present the original in the recording. If necessary, we will also present the porch footage and your medical report. Depending on how he reacts, the judge may call for immediate verification." She paused. "I want you to be prepared for him to lie. Desperate people lie boldly. He will try to paint you as unstable. He will try to paint himself as the victim. He may even say you injured yourself." My stomach twisted at the thought, but I knew she was right. Michael had never hesitated to distort reality when it protected him. He had spent his entire life being shielded from consequences. He would not stop now. "What do I do?" I asked quietly. Harper looked me straight in the eyes. "You tell the truth, and you let the evidence speak louder than his lies." As she walked me to the door, she placed a supportive hand on my arm. "We are going to win this. Not because you are his sister, but because the truth is on your side, and because your grandmother made sure her voice could not be silenced." When I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, grounding me. For the first time since the attack, I felt a steadiness return to my spine. This was not just about a house anymore. This was about my grandmother's final wish. About my safety, about breaking the cycle my family had forced me into since childhood. And as I walked to my car with the folder pressed to my chest, I realized something quietly powerful. Michael had spent years trying to make me small. But now, with every piece of evidence falling into place, I was finally stepping into my own strength. And he had no idea what was coming. The morning of the probate hearing arrived with a heavy gray sky that felt like a weight pressing against my chest, and I woke with a knot of dread coiled so tightly in my stomach it hurt to breathe. I moved through my small apartment on autopilot, brushing my hair gently around the tender spot on my scalp where Michael had slammed my head into the wall, choosing clothes that looked professional enough to hide the shaking in my hands. As I buttoned my blouse, a wave of nausea hit me, part concussion, in part the crushing realization that today might be the day I officially lost everything my grandmother had wanted me to have. I grabbed my folder of documents and walked out to my car, hoping the cold morning air would steady me, but the dread only thickened with each mile I drove toward my childhood home, where I needed to stop first to pick up a few belongings. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered, but the tension radiating from inside was enormous. My mother opened the door before I even knocked. Her face drained of warmth, her lips pressed so tightly together they looked almost bloodless. She did not say hello. Instead, she spoke with a coldness that pierced straight through me. "We are changing the locks after today. Do not come back here again." The words hit harder than any blow Michael had ever delivered. For a moment, I just stood there, stunned, my breath hitching in my throat as if the air had turned into thick syrup. "You are throwing me out!" I finally managed my voice barely audible. "Why?" My mother crossed her arms and glanced away like looking at me physically hurt her. "You only came back here because of the will. You know that is what people are saying. You want to make trouble for your brother at a time when he is overwhelmed and grieving." Grieving. I almost laughed, except the sound died before it left my throat. Michael had not shed a tear for anyone but himself. He stole the will. He hurt me. I held up my hand as if the bruises still visible on my wrist could speak for me, but she shook her head as though refusing to let her eyes recognize any part of my reality. "You have always exaggerated things. You provoke him and then act like a victim. It is exhausting." I felt my knees weaken the world, tilting slightly the way it had the night he attacked me. She was choosing him again. Even now. Even after everything. Something inside me cracked in a way that felt irreversible. I whispered, "You did not even ask me if it was true." She blinked but stayed silent. That silence was louder than any admission of guilt. I turned away before she could see the tears burning behind my eyes. As I walked to my car, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else, someone heavier, someone dragging decades of heartbreak behind them. I slid into the driver's seat, and for a long moment I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe around the ache pressing against my ribs. I had been assaulted by my own brother. I had been blamed by my own mother. And now I was being told I did not have a home to return to. By the time I reached the attorney's office for the probate hearing, the numbness had settled into my bones. Harper met me outside the conference room, her steady voice breaking through the fog in my mind. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. "I do not know," I whispered. "My mother just told me they are changing the locks." Harper's jaw tightened. "I am sorry, Laura, truly, but you need to focus right now. What happens in that room will change everything." I nodded even though nothing felt real. When we stepped into the conference room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The long, polished table gleamed under harsh white lights, and sitting on the far side were my mother and Michael. My mother's eyes were red, but not from sadness for me, and she refused to look directly at me. Michael, on the other hand, sat upright in a crisp navy suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression carefully arranged to project calm confidence. He looked like a man who had already won. In front of him sat a folder stuffed with papers, and I recognized the smug tilt of his chin as the same expression he wore whenever he got away with lying as a child. He even offered me a tight smile that made my stomach twist. Harper placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Remember what we discussed. He will lie. He will exaggerate. Stay steady." But when Mr. Harrison, the probate attorney, entered the room and took his place at the head of the table, my heart began pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Harrison's face was unreadable as he opened the session. Today, we will review the will of Margaret Hayes. Before I could exhale, Michael spoke up with a show of forced grief. I would like to submit additional evidence. He opened his folder and spread out neatly printed emails, text screenshots, and handwritten notes. These demonstrate that my sister pressured our grandmother, manipulated her financially, and threatened to cut ties unless she changed the will. My mother gasped softly and touched his arm. I stared at the papers, every line of every message looking like me but twisted just slightly wrong, rewritten into cruelty and manipulation that I had never expressed. They looked real, too real. My throat closed as I whispered, "That is not me." Michael did not even look in my direction. "She is trying to take advantage of a grieving family," he continued smoothly. "I just want to honor our grandmother's true wishes." I felt myself shrinking inside my own skin. The room blurred at the edges. For a moment, despair washed over me so completely that it felt like drowning. He had fabricated an entire narrative, and my own mother believed him without hesitation. And I had walked into this room thinking maybe even for one moment fairness could exist. I felt the hopelessness settle so deeply it was almost physical. Maybe I was going to lose. Maybe I had never stood a chance. Harper leaned toward me and whispered, "Do not break. Not yet. We have more truth than he has lies. Hold on, Laura, just hold on." I swallowed hard, fighting against the tremor in my voice. But inside, everything felt cracked and hollow, because for the first time in my life, I truly believed I was completely alone. The room felt tighter with every passing second as Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses and looked calmly between the two sides of the table, unaware that the foundation of my entire life felt as though it were tilting beneath my feet. My mother sat stiffly beside Michael, clutching a tissue like someone preparing to mourn something that had not yet happened, while Michael himself maintained the composed confidence of a man who believed he had engineered the perfect narrative. I sat across from them with Harper beside me, trying to keep my breathing steady despite the tremor moving through my body. My pulse thudded in my ears like distant thunder as Harrison opened the file in front of him. "We will begin by reviewing the submitted documents regarding the estate," he announced. Michael leaned forward slightly, hands folded neatly as though he were attending a business presentation, rather than a legal proceeding about our grandmother's final wishes. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," he began smoothly. "As I stated earlier, I have provided additional documentation that clarifies my grandmother's intentions. My sister has been absent for years, only resurfacing recently with claims meant to disrupt this family during a time of grief." My mother nodded along, absorbing each word as though it were undeniable fact. I felt my stomach twist painfully. Michael's lawyerless confidence made more sense now. He thought his lies were airtight. It was not grief he relied on. It was the blind loyalty of a mother who had believed his version of reality for decades. He pointed to the pile of forged emails and notes. "These demonstrate a clear pattern of coercion and manipulation." Harper's voice cut in sharply before Harrison could respond. "These are not verified documents, and we object to their authenticity." Michael let out a small, almost mocking exhale. "Of course she objects. Laura has always had trouble accepting accountability." Harper placed a hand subtly on my arm as if to keep me grounded. "Mr. Bennett," she said in a controlled tone, "we will allow the court to determine whose narrative holds integrity." Harrison cleared his throat. "For now, let us proceed." He reached for the first stack of documents, but before he could begin reviewing them, Michael leaned back in his chair and spoke again, weaving his voice with practiced calm. "I need to remind everyone that Grandma was confused in her final years. She was easily influenced, especially by someone more emotionally reactive. I was the stable one. I helped her with finances. I made sure she was cared for. It is well known that dementia can cause family members to manipulate vulnerable elders for financial gain." He looked directly at me, eyes cold and triumphant. "I know this is hard for you, Laura, but you cannot always blame others for your failures." My hands shook beneath the table. My failures. That word stung more deeply than I expected. My mother dabbed at her eyes, glancing at Michael with complete trust. I felt myself shrinking further. Harrison continued flipping through the pages until Michael interrupted again. If I may add one more thing, I noticed Grandma's signature on the new will is being questioned. I assure you she signed it willingly. There were witnesses. She knew Laura would not return for her. She told me often she wanted to reward the child who stayed close. Harper's jaw tightened with visible irritation. "Enough," Harper said. "Let him keep talking," I whispered, though my voice trembled. "He is building his own grave." But inside, I was breaking, because every sentence he spoke was another reminder of how easily he could twist truth and memory, how effortlessly he could weaponize my absence, even though that absence was born from years of being pushed out, ignored, and forgotten. Harrison finally set down the falsified papers. "I will review these for authenticity," he said carefully. "However, before we proceed further, I believe it is appropriate that we hear the other side." Harper nodded and opened the folder she brought, revealing the original sealed envelope from Mrs. Doyle. She slid it across the table to Harrison. This was entrusted to an external witness by the decedent prior to her cognitive decline. It includes a certified scan of the original will and an audio recording. My mother's face drained of color. Michael frowned, his composure flickering for the first time. "That is irrelevant," he snapped, reaching instinctively toward the envelope. "Grandma updated her will. That is the only valid version." Harper folded her hands calmly. "We will let evidence speak for itself." Harrison opened the envelope, pulling out several documents and the USB drive. As he skimmed the pages, I saw his expression shift, almost imperceptibly. Michael noticed it too. "What is that expression supposed to mean?" he demanded. Harrison plugged in the device, and after a moment the room filled with the crackling sound of my grandmother's voice, older and tired but unmistakably clear. "If something happens to me, I need you to know I trust Laura with my home. She has always had the right heart for it. Michael," her voice wavered sadly, "is not ready to handle responsibility. He has a temper, and he has fallen into financial trouble I cannot ignore." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Michael froze. The recording continued. "I love them both, but Laura is who I want to have the house. She will take care of it. She will honor it. That is my final wish." When the audio ended, silence washed over the table like a shockwave. My chest tightened, unsure whether I wanted to cry or collapse. Michael inhaled sharply through his nose. "That recording could be fake," he snapped, clinging to the last thread of denial. "Grandma never said any of that." Harper leaned forward slightly, her voice level but sharp enough to cut through the air. "There is more." Harrison nodded slowly. "Yes. Before we conclude anything today, we will review all remaining materials." The tension thickened as everyone waited for what would come next. Michael shifted uneasily for the first time since the meeting began, glancing toward the door as if considering escape. My mother stared at the table, her eyes unfocused, her world unraveling in front of her, and for the first time since the attack, a faint spark of something unfamiliar flickered in my chest. Not triumph, not relief, but the fragile beginning of hope, because the truth was no longer buried in a hollow Bible or hidden behind closed doors. The truth was finally speaking for itself, and the light it brought was starting to burn straight through the lies Michael had built for years. The air in the conference room felt charged like the static before a storm as Mr. Harrison set aside the audio recording and opened the next set of documents with deliberate care, each rustle of paper sounding impossibly loud in the stunned silence. Michael sat rigid in his chair, jaw clenching and unclenching, his confidence melting away inch by inch as the truth tightened around him. My mother stared straight ahead, eyes glossy and vacant, as if she were watching the collapse of a structure she had spent her whole life pretending was stable. Harper leaned forward, sensing the momentum, shifting her voice low and steady as she spoke. "Mr. Harrison, we respectfully request that you examine the signature on the newly submitted will. We believe it was forged, and we have a forensic report to support that assertion." She slid the neatly bound report across the table. Harrison opened it, adjusting his glasses as he scanned the detailed pages of analysis. Michael's face flushed a deep red. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Grandma signed it. She knew exactly what she wanted." Harper did not flinch. According to this independent analyst, the signature on your submitted will shows inconsistencies that strongly indicate it did not originate from the same hand. Specifically, hesitation marks inconsistent slant and pressure patterns that differ significantly from verified original signatures. Michael scoffed, but the sound was thin and shaky. Grandma's hand trembled sometimes. That does not prove anything. It proves enough for reasonable suspicion, Harper replied calmly. Harrison turned a page, slowly examining diagrams with meticulous care. The tightening around his eyes told me everything, but Harper was not finished. She straightened her posture and looked directly at him. There is additional evidence. At this point, the tension in the room felt so heavy it could have cracked the ceiling. Michael shifted in his chair, biting the inside of his cheek. His breathing grew shallow, and I noticed for the first time something like fear flicker beneath his practiced exterior. Harper pulled out a small black USB drive and placed it gently on the table. This contains footage from a door camera belonging to Mrs. Doyle, the decedent's longtime neighbor. The footage was recorded the night before Laura was hospitalized. My heart hammered as Harrison plugged the drive into the monitor. The screen flickered, then stabilized, revealing the view of my grandmother's porch under the dim glow of the old porch light. A shadow approached, then another, and suddenly, Michael stepped into view on the screen. He was carrying the sealed legal envelope, the same envelope that held the original will. My breath caught. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Harper's voice was steady but cold. This footage shows Mr. Bennett leaving the property with the decedent's confidential documents. Laura was hospitalized less than an hour later. Michael shot to his feet, knocking his chair back with a jarring scrape. "This is not what it looks like," he barked. "I was holding it for safekeeping. The video does not show anything illegal. I was protecting the documents." Harrison rewound the footage this time, slowing it to half speed. We watched Michael glance over his shoulder, stuff the envelope into his jacket, and walk briskly off the porch. No hesitation, no transparency, not protection. Possession. Harper folded her hands, her eyes narrowing. There is also testimony from Mrs. Doyle herself stating she witnessed an argument and a physical altercation shortly afterward. We have her written statement. Michael let out a strained laugh, but it broke halfway through, sounding more like a gasp for air. She is senile. She is old. You cannot trust the memory of some 90-year-old neighbor who barely sees straight. The conference room door opened at that exact moment. As though summoned by fate, Mrs. Doyle stepped inside her back, straight, her expression unwavering. She removed her coat, folded it neatly over her arm, and said, "Actually, I see quite clearly." Silence fell over the room like a dropped curtain. Michael's face drained of color. My mother inhaled sharply, stunned into stillness. Harper remained beautifully composed. Mrs. Doyle walked confidently to the table, her presence more commanding than any attorney. "I was there that night," she said. Her voice was steady, not frail at all. I heard raised voices through my window. I went outside to check. "I saw you, Michael, taking the envelope. And I saw poor Laura stumbling after you minutes later. You ignored her completely. I was the one who called for help." Michael shook his head violently. "You cannot be serious. You are lying. Why would you lie about something like this?" Mrs. Doyle's eyes hardened. "Your grandmother asked me to look after her granddaughter. I failed to protect her from you sooner. I will not fail now." Harper gave a small nod of gratitude. "That is not all. Harrison, if you would read the next page." Harrison flipped to the next section of the file. His voice was calm, but each word struck like a hammer. This report includes a detailed analysis confirming irregularities in the metadata of the alleged emails and text messages Mr. Bennett submitted. The timestamps were altered, and the sender information traces back to an account created using a VPN registered under your name. My mother's sob escaped before she could stop it. Michael's shoulders slumped, the strength draining out of him. He collapsed back into his chair, staring at the table as though trying to will it to swallow him whole. Harper pressed forward. "In summary, we have a recording of the decedent stating her true wishes, a forensic report disproving the authenticity of the new will, camera footage capturing Michael, removing legal documents without authorization testimony of a witness to both the removal and the subsequent assault, and digital forensics proving document falsification." The truth is not ambiguous. It is overwhelming. The sound that came from Michael was not a word, but something closer to a strangled growl. He slammed his fist on the table. This is a setup. You are all turning on me. I am the one who took care of her. I deserve that house. I deserve something. Harper looked at him with calm pity. You deserve accountability. Harrison slowly set down the papers. His gaze moved to Michael, heavy with finality. Mr. Bennett, will you be providing any additional explanation before I contact law enforcement? Michael looked between each face in the room, and for the first time he seemed to realize no one believed him. His lies had run out of air. His power was gone, and for the first time he sat speechless. The room felt unbearably still as Michael sat frozen in his chair, his chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths, his eyes darting from face to face as if searching for even one person who still believed him. But the illusion he had spent years building had shattered, and the truth lay scattered across the polished table like broken glass. Mr. Harrison closed the file in front of him with a soft, decisive click that echoed louder than any spoken judgment. His expression was solemn, the kind reserved for moments where a line had been crossed so clearly that no amount of explanation could blur it again. Before I proceed with next steps, he said carefully, there is one more matter that needs to be addressed. His voice was steady, but there was a weight behind it that made Michael stiffen. Harrison pulled out a slim document from another folder. During the initial review, law enforcement requested supplemental background checks. In those checks, a prior domestic violence complaint surfaced that was filed by your former partner 3 years ago. My mother gasped, her hand flying up to cover her mouth as she turned to Michael with disbelief and horror, though not quite shock, as though some part of her had always known but refused to acknowledge. Michael's jaw tightened. That was dismissed. It was nothing. He was lying, but this time his voice lacked conviction. Harrison continued reading with clinical precision. The complaint documented physical intimidation, property destruction, and credible threats of harm. Although your partner later withdrew the statement, the incident remains relevant, particularly in light of the assault on your sister and the emerging pattern of behavior. A cold wave moved through my body. I had never known this. Michael had hidden far more darkness than our family imagined. Harper leaned toward Harrison. There is also the matter of witness intimidation. Harrison nodded. Yes. Thank you for the reminder. He reached for another page. Last week, a report was filed by Mrs. Doyle indicating that Mr. Bennett appeared at her doorstep late at night. He made statements she interpreted as threats, warning her not to get involved. Michael shot up from his chair again. That is not true. I never threatened her. She is lying because she hates me for not mowing her lawn when I was younger. Mrs. Doyle let out a small, disbelieving snort. Michael's voice rose in panic. She is exaggerating. You cannot take her seriously. She is almost 90. My mother reached out as though trying to steady herself, her fingers trembling. Michael, did you go to her house? He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence that followed answered for him. Harrison exhaled, his tone heavy with finality. With the combination of forgery, falsification of evidence, removal of legal documents without authorization, the recorded assault, and the witness intimidation report, I am obligated to contact law enforcement immediately. The door opened before he could even reach for his phone. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside with calm authority, as though they had been waiting just outside for their cue. One of them spoke clearly. Mr. Michael Bennett, you are under arrest for assault, attempted fraud, tampering with evidence, and obstruction. Michael's face drained of all color. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly before he managed to choke out, You cannot do this. This is a family matter. Families fix things privately. The officer stepped forward, reciting his rights while pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Michael backed into the edge of the table as though trying to disappear into it, his voice cracking. Mom, do something. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them I did not do anything wrong. My mother stared at him with a look I had never seen on her face before, a mixture of disbelief, regret, and dawning clarity that seemed to break her from the inside out. I do not know who you are, she whispered. Those 6 words hit Michael harder than the officers gripping his arms. He sagged, the remaining thread of denial snapping. When they turned him toward the door, he caught my eye. His expression twisted into something between desperation and hatred. "You set me up! You ruined everything!" My voice came out calm and steady, almost foreign to my own ears. "No, Michael. You ruined everything yourself." The officers led him out, his voice fading down the hallway, a mix of incoherent protests and increasingly frantic pleas. The moment the door shut behind him, the room released a collective breath none of us realized we had been holding. For a few seconds, everything was silent except the faint hum of the overhead lights. My mother sat heavily in her chair, staring at the floor, as if trying to reconcile the son she thought she knew with the man who had just been arrested in front of her. After a long moment, she looked at me, eyes red and haunted. "Laura, why did you not tell me about the threats? Or the violence?" I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "Because you would not have believed me." Her face crumpled. She knew I was right. Harper gathered the documents, her movements methodical and respectful, giving us space as she prepared the final legal details. Harrison cleared his throat. "Given everything presented here today, the rightful beneficiary of the estate is unquestionably Laura Bennett." The words washed over me with a mix of relief and sorrow. I had won, but what I lost along the way felt immeasurable. My mother wiped her eyes, voice shaking. "I failed you. I failed both of you, but especially you. I should have protected you from him. I should have listened." I wanted to feel anger, wanted to scream or tell her she had no right to cry now after standing by him every step of the destruction he caused. But all I felt was exhaustion. I rose slowly, bracing myself against the table for a moment as the room tilted slightly. My injuries still reminded me of that night, of his hands in my hair, the impact of the wall against my skull. But I stood, and my voice, though soft, was steady. "I do not need your apology today. I need time. And boundaries." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I understand." Harper stepped beside me, gently guiding me toward the door. "You did it," she said softly. "You stood up when it mattered most." As we left the room, I looked back one last time. The chair Michael had occupied was still askew from when he jumped to his feet, the scattered papers, a quiet testament to the lies that had finally collapsed under their own weight. It struck me then that this was not just the end of Michael's unraveling. It was the end of an entire chapter of my life, one built on being overlooked, silenced, and dismissed. And now, for the first time, the truth was mine, and so was the future. The days that followed felt strangely quiet, as though the world had exhaled after months of holding its breath, and for the first time since my grandmother's passing, I allowed myself to feel the stillness rather than fear it. I returned to her house alone on a sunny afternoon, the kind she used to call good weather for thinking, and as I stepped inside, a soft wave of familiarity wrapped around me. The scent of lemon polish lingered faintly on the banister, the wooden floor creaked in the same places it always had, and sunlight spilled across the hallway in a warm, gentle path that felt like an invitation. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, absorbing the realization that this home was truly mine. Now not as a possession, but as a responsibility entrusted to me by someone who saw me clearly, even when everyone else chose not to. My fingers brushed the envelope Mrs. Doyle had given me days earlier. Not the legal documents this time, but the small, sealed letter addressed in my grandmother's fragile handwriting, as well as the journal she had kept tucked inside her dresser. I carried them into the living room, the same place where she used to knit in silence, while I sat beside her as a child, and I lowered myself onto her old floral couch, feeling the cushion sink exactly the way it did when she was alive. The journal was bound in worn blue fabric edges frayed from years of use. I opened to the first page and saw her handwriting, careful but imperfect, full of the soft loops that always made me think of her humming while she cooked. The entries were not long, but they carried weight. In one, she wrote about watching Michael lose his temper in the driveway with an ex-girlfriend and how it made her hands shake long after he left. In another, she described how my mother defended him even when the evidence of his actions lay in broken glass on the ground. She wrote that she feared what would happen to me if the family ever turned fully against me, and how she wished she could protect me long after she was gone. Tears blurred my vision as I read an entry dated only a few months before she died. Laura has a good heart. She does not push herself forward and she does not fight for attention, but she sees people in ways others do not. I want her to have this house because she will fill it with kindness, not ambition. I know Michael will be angry. I know my daughter will not understand, but I also know that strength comes in quiet forms, and Laura has more of it than she realizes. My throat tightened as I traced her words with the tip of my finger. She had known me in ways my own parents never bothered to. She had seen the parts of me I spent years hoping someone might recognize. When I finally set the journal aside, I reached for the sealed letter. For a long moment, I simply held it, running my thumb along the envelope's ridge, afraid to open something so final. But eventually, I drew in a shaky breath and slid my finger under the flap. The paper inside was thin, fragile with age, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers. My dearest Laura, if you are reading this, it means the truth has come out, though it may have cost you more than I ever wished for. I am sorry for the pain my silence may have caused. I was afraid to confront the patterns I saw forming, afraid that my daughter would turn away from me if I spoke aloud what my heart already knew. You were the one who deserved better, not the one who failed. Her words broke something inside me that had been clenched tight for years. She continued, I want you to make this house yours. Fill it with the things you love, not the shadows others tried to cast over you. This home is my final gift to you, not for what you have done, but for who you are. I believe in you, and I hope one day you will believe in yourself just as deeply. I wiped my face with my sleeve, overwhelmed by a bittersweet mixture of gratitude and grief. Holding her letter felt like holding her hand across time, like she had reached back to steady me in the moment I needed it most. With renewed purpose, I spent the next few days moving slowly through the house room by room, restoring pieces of her life with a tenderness that surprised even me. I dusted her framed photographs, washed the delicate china bowls she loved, and opened the windows to let in fresh air and sunlight. Each task felt like a small act of devotion, a way of thanking her for choosing me, for trusting me, for seeing me. Eventually, I found myself standing in the small room at the back of the house, the one she always said would make a perfect study or nursery. As I gazed around the empty space, an idea took shape so quickly and so clearly that it felt like my grandmother whispered it into my ear. I wanted to create something meaningful here, something that honored her legacy and reflected the heart she believed I had. With Harper's guidance and encouragement from the director at the Alzheimer's Center where I worked, I began making plans to turn the house into a small community resource space for caregivers, patients, and families dealing with memory loss. A place where people could come for support education or simply a comforting cup of tea when the world felt too heavy. The idea breathed life into the rooms in a way nothing else had. The following weeks were filled with renovation schedules, conversations with architects, fundraising calls, and more paperwork than I imagined possible. But for the first time in my life, stress felt purposeful. Every nail hammered, every wall painted, every blueprint reviewed felt like stitching a wound closed. And each time doubt crept into my mind, I returned to the journal and reread the entries where she spoke of her faith in me. It was enough to keep me going. On a quiet morning near the end of the renovations, I stood alone in what was once her living room. The walls were freshly painted, the floors gleamed, and the faint scent of new beginnings lingered in the air. I closed my eyes and let the silence settle around me. For the first time in years, my chest felt light instead of tight. My grandmother's house was no longer a battleground of betrayal and loss. It was becoming a sanctuary, a place of healing. And so was I. The grand opening of the Caregiver Center came on a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air feels thin and new, as if the world is offering you a chance to breathe differently. The sun filtered through the branches of the maple tree my grandmother planted decades ago, casting warm, shifting patterns across the walkway as volunteers and families began to gather outside. I stood by the newly painted door, my hand resting on the bronze plaque engraved with her name, Margaret Hayes Community Care House, and felt a rush of emotion swell in my chest so suddenly that for a moment I could not breathe. I traced the letters with my fingertip, remembering how she used to hum while knitting, how her hand felt in mine when she told me stories I did not know I needed to hear. And now her name was on the building where others would find comfort and understanding in the moments they needed it most. When I stepped inside, sunlight spilled across the polished floors and soft green walls filling the rooms with a warmth that felt almost alive. Volunteers moved quietly between stations, setting out materials for workshops and support groups. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the small kitchen, blending with the faint scent of lavender we had incorporated intentionally to honor her memory. I walked through the rooms slowly, letting the space speak to me the way it had since the day I decided to transform this house into something more than a monument to grief. The laughter of a small child echoed from one corner as his mother filled out an intake form. A caretaker exhaled a shaky breath of relief when she learned we had weekly support circles for families dealing with late-stage Alzheimer's. A newly diagnosed patient sat reading a pamphlet, his eyes softening with understanding as one of our staff members explained resources available to him. Healing was happening here already, and the doors had only just opened. As I moved into what used to be my grandmother's sitting room, I paused by the bookshelf that still held her old Bible, the one with the hollowed center where she had hidden the photocopy of her will. Beside it sat her journal, which I now kept on display inside a locked glass case open to the page where she wrote about the quiet strength she saw in me. That entry had become the heart of this house, a message that guided the choices I made and the boundaries I rebuilt. Standing there, I felt the deep ache of everything that had happened, but instead of drowning in it, I felt it settle into something steadier, something like truth. Trauma does not disappear when justice is served. Healing is not instant. Some wounds become part of the topography of your life, but I had learned to breathe around them, to build around them, to grow in the spaces pain had carved out. As I looked around the room, I thought of Michael. News of his guilty plea spread quietly in our town. He had accepted a deal for reduced sentencing, including probation restitution payments and mandatory counseling. The fraud and assault charges were serious enough to ensure he would not regain the privilege he once wielded so carelessly. I did not feel satisfaction when I imagined him sitting in a courtroom hearing his fate. I felt something closer to release. The day of his sentencing, my mother tried to call me. The phone rang 4 times before I declined it. I was not ready. Maybe I would never be. But forgiveness was not the goal of my healing anyway. Survival was. My father wrote me a letter instead of calling, telling me he understood why I needed distance, telling me he regretted his silence, his blindness, his eagerness to believe the narrative that required the least effort. I did not respond, but I kept the letter tucked in a drawer. I was not done needing space, but I was no longer fueled by anger. Boundaries could coexist with compassion, but they had to be firm and deliberate. Later that morning, as the center began to fill with more visitors, Harper arrived. She walked in with her usual quiet confidence, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something," she said, handing it to me. When I opened it, I found a framed copy of the original property transfer document my grandmother had refused to sign years ago when Michael attempted his first act of deception. I stared at it, feeling the weight of everything it symbolized. "She saw through him long before anyone else did," Harper said. "She believed in you long before you believed in yourself." I felt tears gather but blinked them back because today was not a day for breaking open. It was a day for beginning again. I hugged her, grateful beyond words. A moment later, Mrs. Doyle appeared near the doorway, leaning slightly on her cane, but standing tall with the same fire that had carried her through the courtroom. When she saw me, she smiled slowly, her eyes warm with pride. "I told your grandmother I would look after you," she said softly. "I think she would be quite pleased to see this." I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her, careful not to squeeze too tightly. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." She patted my hand. "You did the hardest part yourself." The ceremony began shortly afterward. People gathered in a semicircle outside as I stepped up to the small podium we had decorated with autumn leaves and white chrysanthemums, my grandmother's favorite. When the crowd quieted, I opened my notebook to the speech I had written, but found that the words I needed were not on the page. So I closed it gently and spoke from the place inside me that had been reshaped by pain and rebuilt by truth. For a long time, I believed that love meant enduring what others inflicted. I began. I thought loyalty meant silence. I thought family meant I had no right to protect myself. But survival taught me something different. Love without respect is not love. Loyalty without truth is not loyalty. And blood alone is not family. Choices are. Faces in the crowd softened. Some nodded. A few wiped their eyes. This house was once a place of fear because someone tried to take from me what was never theirs. But today it becomes a place of healing because someone who loved me chose to trust me with her legacy. My voice wavered slightly. My grandmother left me this house not to burden me with the past, but to give me a future. And today I share that future with all of you. When the audience applauded, the sound washed over me like a warm tide. I stepped down from the podium and walked to the center's front door. With a steady inhale, I turned the handle and opened it wide, letting the autumn light spill across the threshold. For the first time, I felt not like a survivor of what my family did to me, but like the architect of the life I was choosing next. And the life ahead of me felt vast, bright, and entirely my own. If you stayed with me through this entire journey, I want to speak to you directly now, not as someone who inherited a house or uncovered a family secret or survived something violent, but simply as a person who knows what it feels like to carry pain that no one else seems to see. If anything in my story echoed a part of your own life, I hope you take this moment to breathe and remind yourself that you deserve peace, safety, and respect, no matter who tries to convince you otherwise. Healing after betrayal is not a straight line. Some days you feel strong and steady, and some days you feel like you are standing in the ruins of a life you thought you had. But if there is one truth I learned, it is that you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to build a life that feels safe, even if the people who share your blood never understand why. If you felt seen in any part of my journey, I want to invite you to join this community. Here we share stories of survival, justice, and resilience, not to relive trauma, but to reclaim our voices. Every week we bring you narratives about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances, stories that remind us that even in the darkest moments, truth has a way of rising. If you want more stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support helps us reach others who might be sitting alone in their living room right now, wondering if anyone else in the world knows what they are going through. Leave a comment if you have ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members, or if you found your strength in a moment when you thought you had none left. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you want to go one step further, share this video with a friend who might need a reminder that they are not alone and that choosing themselves is not selfish, but necessary. This channel is built on connection, empathy, and truth, and your presence here makes it stronger. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your heart to this story. Thank you for standing with survivors, for believing in justice, and for helping these stories reach the people who need them most. Until next time, take care of yourself the way you wish others had taken care of you. You deserve nothing less.